Okay, recording. This is the 24th Sunday after Pentecost. We're counting down now. We're in the last several weeks. The November 28th, I think, is our first Sunday of Advent. So we're, as November disappears, so does Pentecost. Today we are in Mark chapter 15. We are in what's called the Passion. We've had, over the last several weeks, we've had the Last Supper, we've had the Garden of Gethsemane, and we've had what's known as the first trial before the Sanhedrin, although we will make a note about that today. Today is, I've got it labeled trials plural, but an easy reading or a casual reading of chapter 15, you might say, I only see one trial. It looks like what's known as the trial before Pilate. But there's more going on here. And then we're also going to criticize whether or not it's even a trial. Okay. But before we get there, we are dealing with what's known as the Passion. And Jesus, during, especially in today's class, he is standing there taking the worst they can throw at him. Now, obviously, actually being nailed to the cross is worse. But they are throwing everything they can. And he is standing there with complete dignity. He is revealing his power in a way that, the scripture is going to say, Pilate is amazed. He's blown away by this guy standing before him. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was thinking, while I was doing that, it might be interesting to ponder. Why didn't Jesus defend himself?
He could have, could have called legions of angels.
Sure.
Well, that's a different kind of defense. He could have called the angel armies that he had at his disposal.
Absolutely.
But Tim's using the word defense like we do in a legal case. Why didn't he mount a defense?
He was asked to defend himself. I wanted to know why should I set you free?
They probably could have said something that made sense, and Pilate would have said, just go.
Yeah. But all he did was truthfully answer the questions that he was directly asked.
Yeah. He didn't propose any witnesses.
Exactly.
Imagine the list of witnesses he could have brought forward that day.
All those people.
All the people he fed. Tim just did the feeding of the 4,000. He could have said, I want to bring in and depose 9,000 men who had dinner with me. You know, I've healed, I've walked on water, I've fed people. He could have brought in witness after witness.
So the question is, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they raise a finger in defense? Nothing he said in his own defense.
Well, I think is because he knew he was afraid, right? But he said didn't you say he was afraid of dying?
No.
Well, in the garden, he prays that the cup be removed from him. And I think anybody with a reasonable mind would be worried about going to the cross. That is a horrible way to die. But I don't think Jesus was a coward. So I don't think what he was praying for was as much the pain of the cross as the sinfulness that he was about to receive.
And a forsakenness by his Father.
Yeah. He's gonna take our sin on him. And you have to remember, you and I, we're sinners. We're used to sin. Okay? We acknowledge it that it's nasty, but we are sinful. He was sinless, and he was about to receive all of our sin. And I think that was the bigger problem for him, was that when he takes on the sin, God the Father, the hymn we just said, painful loss as the Father turns his face away.
Getting back to the defense question, if I might put words in your mouth, Andrew, you started to say he knew, and I think that's what it is. He knew God's plan. He knew the Father's plan.
Yes.
And to try to defend himself would have been to thwart God's plan.
Right.
Yeah. It would defy God's plan.
No, that's right.
God had this.
The plan
He's
is,
just said in the garden, nevertheless, your will be done.
and I think that
That's what
we can say that Jesus and God knew that this whole story would end on a cross, without saying that God wanted him to die on the cross. God's knowing that this situation is going to require his son's sacrifice does not mean that he wants that to happen. I'm just qualifying my words carefully here. I think God suffers here, but he doesn't stop the suffering. That's the point. And for Jesus to try to throw up a defense would be stopping the suffering. Anyway, let's get to the actual verses. The first line says, very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. Now, this is stop the presses. We discussed last week a trial. We said it was illegal. You can't do it at night. You're not supposed to do it in the courtyard of the chief priest. You're supposed to do it where the Sanhedrin normally meets. They didn't do that. So they were engaged in an illegal, whatever this was, a tribunal.
Okay. In today's law, it would be a mistrial.
Yeah, okay, but now look what they did. As soon as morning comes, now it's daytime, they rush down to the Sanhedrin where they were supposed to meet, and they redo the decision. That's what the first sentence says. Yeah. They now have put on the record, the court, you can imagine the court reporter there, okay, they have now met the terms. They have met during the day in the place where the Sanhedrin meets, and they had taken the vote.
And apparently more, the whole council showed up.
Yes, we don't know the difference between the numbers of people. Now we've got maybe the whole Sanhedrin. Some of them might be surprised that this thing has gotten so far along, but Mark doesn't tell us about that. Now we do know from other gospels that at least two Sanhedrin members, Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, they would have been shocked, I would think, if this was going this way. But Mark doesn't tell us about that. Did you have a question? No, I thought you have that thing in front of you. I thought that was your hand up. Okay. But my point is they quickly rushed a Sanhedrin decision, and now they go to Pilate. I've said this before. The Jews do not have the authority. Remember, they are a conquered people. They do not have the authority to execute anybody. And they had decided in our discussion last week, Jesus had committed blasphemy by saying that he was the Son of God. And the chief priest describes that as blasphemy. We agree with Jesus, but we can also understand why the chief priest would consider that to be blasphemy. Anyway, in Jewish law, blasphemy is punishable by death, but the death penalty is off the table for Jews. They have to go to Pilate, hence that sentence. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Now, Pilate is an interesting situation. He is a despicable character. He hates Jews. Probably today would call him an anti-Semite.
Wow.
But he also, they hated him. Okay. No love lost between the Jews and Pilate. He had killed, we have no way of knowing, but it's hundreds, thousands of Jews. This was just another one. This guy comes into his courtroom, or into his, whatever they call it, his magisterium or throne room, whatever. And Pilate isn't worried about Jesus at all. He will flick him away. He's just another Jew worthy of death. Now, he might be interested. Why are the Jews bringing me this? Now, keep in mind, most Jews don't like Romans, and they don't offer up Jews to Rome for death. In fact, I would think that the oppression from Rome would cause the Jews to be the opposite, to be secretive. But here, the Jews are marching into Pilate's throne room and saying, here, kill this guy for us. I would think that might cause Pilate to pause.
Red flag shoot.
To pause for a moment and say, this is odd.
Yeah.
Why are they giving me this guy? Now, remember that the charge that the chief priest gave Jesus was, are you the Son of God? Jesus answered, yes. Here, Pilate says, are you the King of the Jews? Now, just a little bit of translation difference there. Now, first of all, Pilate must have been given that charge by the chief priest. Pilate would have said, why do you bring this guy? Now, the chief priest knew if he said, well, because this guy claims to be the Son of God. Pilate would have said, I don't care.
Yeah.
We have gods all over the place. You know, we got little temples standing all over the place.
Even a God to the unknown case.
Yeah, that's right, case they invest one. So gods don't matter us. But the one thing he could possibly say, the chief priest could say to Pilate, which would get Pilate interested, is some sort of insurrection, some sort of rebellion, treason. And so, King of the Jews must have been the translation that the chief priest offered Pilate. This guy says he's a king.
So really, they lied about it because they had asked him.
They had not asked. Apparently, yes. That's right. Now, the thing is, though, we know because we're Christians, we understand this language and it's correct. He is the king, and that notice that's what Jesus says. Yes, it is as you say. So he says, okay, if that's the question, then yes, I'm the king. Jesus is not going to lie about his situation. So this is not a defense. It's an answer to a direct question, and he says, yes, I am the king. Matthew takes pains to explain how Jesus is in the line of David. So he's qualified to say that he's in the lineage of David. But he's also qualified because the role that God gives him in this whole plan. Now, there's something missing here. And I think it's between verse 2 and 3, but it doesn't matter. But at this point, I think it's in the Gospel of John, Pilate says, oh, this is interesting. You're a king of the Jews? We've already got one of those. His name is Herod. He has authority over this region. I'm going to send you to Herod. Pilate apparently wants someone else to make the decision. Even though he has the authority, he's hoping that somebody else will take this off his plate.
Which is a little strange, given what you just said, that Pilate doesn't care whether he kills Jews or not.
Yeah, that is true, Tim. That's right.
So maybe something has started to build between Pilate and Jesus in terms of
Some question.
what is with this guy.
I think Pilate smelled a rat. It was a trap.
Well, it
And he
was.
thought, yeah, but it really wasn't.
It was being used.
It was being used.
Yeah, again.
Yeah. But all Pilate seemed to care about is everything was copacetic.
But anyway, Mark doesn't tell us anything about this. He doesn't mention the side trip to Herod. Now, in the gospel, I believe it's of John, Jesus does go to Herod, and Herod wants a trick. He wants a miracle. He doesn't really want to engage in theological discussion and learn anything. He says, I've heard this guy is a miracle worker. Maybe he will do some magic for me. And Jesus gave him none of that. And Herod, done with you, sends you back to Pilate. So that trial with Herod is hidden here. Mark doesn't tell us anything about it. So now we're back to Pilate. We're back in the room with Pilate. And Pilate is getting confused. He has had one question that Jesus did answer. Are you the king of the Jews? Yes. Okay. What about all these other charges? And we don't know. Mark, this is what Mark often does. He tells us that something was said, but he doesn't tell us what it was. He just says it was said. So the chief priest accused him of many things. It would have been nice if we had been given at least the first, bullet points of how the charges were laid out. And Pilate's summary is, see how many things they are accusing you of. Now, I don't know what these things were. Are they expanding on the concept of being king of the Jews? Are they coming up with ways of describing rebellious behavior? There was none in Jesus' real history, so I don't know what they could have been accusing him of. Jesus made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. He was used to seeing people tried. This was a normal part of his job. Criminals were tried by Pilate.
And they're usually crying and begging for the right.
That's exactly my point. Yep.
Yeah.
People beg for mercy. They try to explain away any negative charges. And if they can't do that, then they simply ask for mercy. And as I said, Pilate wasn't known for giving mercy, except in one case. And that's what's coming next. It's a strange practice, but to ameliorate, that's the right word? To satisfy the crowd that was usually there in Jerusalem, they would release a prisoner who was otherwise condemned. As a condemned prisoner. Now remember, the normal way this goes, the Jews hate Pilate, Pilate hates the Jews. And so the idea would be, well, if I guess Pilate's thinking, well, if I give them back one of theirs, who would otherwise die, that will buy me some goodwill. The overall situation is still very bad. Yeah, it's to placate this. Okay.
There may be another aspect to it in addition to that. If he offers them a choice, Jesus or Barabbas, they make the choice.
Yes. Oh,
That's true.
he
Shifts the
so he
decision.
it is.
He doesn't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah, right.
Now, here's where my commentator said this might be an indication that Pilate's still trying to figure out why the Jews brought this guy in the first place. And so he's thinking that it's the problem is the chief priests are jealous of this guy. And he's really, I don't know, some kind of I'm making this up now, but some kind of a reformer. He's basically a good guy that the chief priests don't like.
There's a lot of jealousy.
So this guy's been brought to me. I know what I'll do. I'll let the people, turn it around on the chief priests.
Yeah.
So that's where we get to next. Now, it was a custom at the feast to release a prisoner. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. So he's a murderer, I kept wanting to say convicted murderer.
Was that the guy that was right next to Jesus Christ?
No. He gets away free. He walks away.
In fact, that cross was meant for Barabbas.
That's a very good point, Tim. I'm going to come back to that.
He was a Zionist.
The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do what he usually did. Now here, this is where Pilate said, well, what I usually do is I give away, one prisoner. So I'll give away Jesus. So that's what he says. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Pilate's thinking he's gaming this little system.
Right, making it as favorable as possible.
Knowing it was out of envy that the chief priest had handed Jesus over. So that's his thinking.
Yeah.
But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. Barabbas, the convicted murderer, is about to go free, and Jesus, the innocent King of the Jews, is about to be sentenced to death. What shall I do with the King of the Jews then? Crucify, they say.
So Barabbas was the first person saved by Christ.
Yeah.
Yes. Tim and I, we must have read this.
Andy Flynn, he was Barabbas.
Yeah. Tim and I read the same commentator because that point stuck with me this week. The first person to be able to really say that Jesus died for my sins.
Jesus took my place.
Yeah. Literally.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't tell us that the third cross was Barabbas's, but it does tell us he's a convicted insurrectionist.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't that cross, it was one very close by. Yeah, it was coming for him. I think that is an interesting story that Barabbas goes free. Pilate released Barabbas to them. Now, I meant to. Oh yeah, one more time. Here is Pilate's reaction to this whole thing. Okay, you don't want me to release Jesus to you. What should I do with him? They yell, crucify. And then this question actually, why? What crime has he committed? If the judge actually were to say that in our courts, there is no crime here.
Right.
Then he would declare a mistrial, whatever words, I don't know what right words we would use. The judge would end the case.
Right.
Case dismissed. There is no crime. But that's not the Roman system. In the Roman system, Pilate had absolute authority. So he could decide to kill somebody because it was expedient. We don't have that category in our system. We don't kill people because it is expedient. It's better than the alternative.
Except for babies.
Except for babies. Okay, thank you, Tim. That's actually true.
Yeah, there's the Supreme Court on talking about.
Yeah, it's going to come back around.
Yeah, I don't really agree with that.
Jesus had, okay, just a quick one here, because we're running out of time. Pilate releases Barabbas and then turns Jesus over to the process. And part of the process is flogging. And then you march to the crucifixion. Flogging is by itself sometimes fatal.
Yeah.
Particularly grisly. They did a pretty good job of that in Mel Gibson's movie,
Yeah.
The Passion, how gory it was. Just, it was not unusual for the back of the person being flogged. It's so ripped up, you can see the bone.
Yeah. Sometimes
Even see his organs. So his back has been torn apart. And at this point, I mean, if you're not dead from loss of blood, you're now asked to carry the crossbeam of your cross through the city, and you're heading out to be crucified. Yes, sir.
Interesting side point on Mel Gibson's movie. Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus, said that during that scene, they made a mistake and 2 of the floggings actually did hit him.
got too close.
And he almost passed anyway. 2.
Yeah. They had him shielded, obviously,
Yeah.
so that the actual strikes wouldn't hit his body, but those things are loose, and so
Right.
that's what I understand.
Leather, right?
Yeah.
Leather straps in the middle stuff.
Glass, bone,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each end of the leather strip would have a bone or a piece of glass tied to the end, and that's what ripped the body away. Anyway, okay. Now the soldiers. The soldiers take Jesus, but before they take him out to crucify him, they have some fun. This is just nasty. The purple robe, the sign of royalty is purple. Where they got a purple robe from, I have no idea. This is not something that the average guard would have in his locker. So I don't know why they had access to a purple robe, but that's what it says. They dressed him up as if he was a king, but they were making fun of him. They were Heil Hitler kind of symbolism, but they didn't believe it. They made the crown of thorns instead of a crown. They struck him on the head. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And then my commentator said that they spit on him. Okay, we had spitting before in the Sanhedrin. Here we get spitting again. But this is where the Greek language has other tenses. This is a continuous spitting. So it's not just one guard walks up and spits. It's the verb means continuous spitting. That just makes it more disgusting. The whole crowd, perhaps, or the crowd repeatedly were engaging in this. I don't know. Anyway, it ends with they lead him out to crucify. Now, this is where we're going to see a familiar story next week. Simon of Cyrene comes into the story. So we do have more to do, but we are out of time for today. Comments or questions?
Didn't they cast lots for his clothing?
That's at the
Because
foot.
that was from Isaiah.
Well, that's at the, oh, yes, they are going to. That's at the foot of the cross there. That hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Basically, kind of spitting on Jesus, is that basically disrespectful for like disrespecting God?
Disrespect. Yes. Now, of course, we see this as disrespect for God. They are, it's, you know, it's gross. There is no way that this is appropriate behavior towards God. But they didn't believe he was God. They believed he was another Jew. Remember, they've killed hundreds. Each one of these guys probably is engaged in several crucifixions. These are experienced soldiers. This is just another one. Nothing unusual about this at all. Now, at least one of them is going to come around to a different idea later. Remember that? One of the guards at the foot of the cross looks up and says, "Surely this man is the Son of God."
Yeah.
But that's later in the story. At the moment, the guards are just nasty.
Is that the centurion in Mel Gibson's movie? Did they have someone there?
Is it
that really was panned, wasn't it? But it seems like it had a lot of accurate stuff.
Oh, it was accurate.
Yeah, it was very
Wasn't
accurate.
the movie-
Yeah. They didn't like Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson's a very conservative religious Catholic.
Okay.
Very Catholic.
So people panned.
And so they didn't like his approach to other things, for example, abortion and homosexuality. He's got traditional Catholic beliefs on those things. They can't stand it. I don't know what else he got engaged in, but that was it. Okay, let me change the share to bring up the Lord's Prayer so we can close today's class. Let's close with prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, God.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Any comments for the good of the cause?
Blessed, be safe.
Thank you, Bill. I hope your meetings, Pat, I hope you're able to see John this week as the shutdown ends.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to end the meeting. See you all next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.